Had to pull the ring light out for Leo, Please don't use that. Hey, Leo, and welcome to your June 2021 monthly forecast. We're going to jump right into it because Mercury retrograde has already begun. It is already a thing, and it's happening in your 11th house of large groups. That's with friend groups or professional circles. So there could be a restructuring of those groups, or more than anything, just the ways in which you might think about them, the ways in which you might communicate in them. It could also very well mean that people from your past that are no longer in those groups could come back into the fold very directly in regard to they reach out to connect with you, or you reach out to connect with them, or even indirectly, like you might run into them, or they might just appear in your social media algorithm, something like that. The focus for Mercury retrograde in the 11th house would be in how you think about and also how you communicate in large groups, and whether that is serving you or is a disservice to you. Are there specific groups that you might need to associate with less or more? The way in which you've established your dynamic might need to change. I would say that the focus very much is on large groups and 11th house themes of professional circles. The 11th house comes right after the 10th house of career and legacy and reputation. So there is a tie to it falling right after that, and how these circles are typically circles that are associated with career or associated with what we seek to be remembered for. Now, the eclipse that's occurring on the 10th is a very potent eclipse, and it's also happening in this 11th house. So you can expect some shakeups that occur in these large friend circles. So be mindful how you communicate with these people, especially with Mars moving into your first house a day later. Mars is tied to conflict. It's also tied to drive, ambition, and assertion. And Mars in Leo is a little bit of a rawr kind of Mars. So you could be definitely seeking to roar in these circles at this time. So be mindful how you roar more than anything. I am a big believer that eclipses, while they're considered wily severing agents, have us part with what no longer serve us in order to usher in the new. So this could be a time of breaking away from some groups in order to find, or in order to move into new groups, whether it's friend circles or professional business groups. What may it be? The 11th house could very well be associated with like more social media based groups, or like technological, not necessarily like in-person groups as well, given its collective lens. So I would also be very mindful with how you interact and how you navigate social media around this time. Be very careful about being a keyboard warrior, since it absolutely will come back to bite you more than any other time. Of course, everything on the internet never dies and is always there, but especially potent during Mercury retrograde and an eclipse in your 11th house. Venus and the Sun will move into your 12th house at different points during the month. Venus very early, and then the Sun on the 20th. There's a lot of energy in the 12th house, which has to do with what is hidden, what is buried, what is not seen. It could be tied to all the things we don't like to talk about at parties, which is trauma, grief, vulnerability, shame, and our feelings around that. You might very well feel called to address those themes around this time. With the Sun and Venus being considered the lesser benefic and being tied to values and self-worth, there is some positive energy to help you navigate kind of piecing through all the mud and the murkiness involved with that. And I encourage you to steadfast and courageously approach that. Anytime we're dealing with the 12th house, we're going to be dealing with those murky things that are hidden and those coming to the surface. Given that Mercury retrograde is in your 11th, it could very well be how those large groups or people from those large groups affect those 12th house themes that I just mentioned. More than anything, I think what's interesting is that Mars will enter Leo on the 11th in your first house. So not only are we one solar season by the end of June away from your solar season, but Mars will be in your first house, really kind of prompting you to be courageous in all things, whether it's in approaching, addressing these groups, changing up these groups, whatever might be changing, or courageously addressing that more internal side of things I mentioned with those 12th house transits. Now, Mars in the first is also very much tied to conflict as well. So like I mentioned, with Mercury retrograding in your 11th and Mars being in your first for most of the month, just be very mindful how you roar, and for what is the ultimate purpose behind the roar, because big believer that boundaries are important to set for ourselves and really individuating ourselves and our needs, but how we go about setting them is something to think about at this time. I think it's an exciting month for the overarching trajectory of the year for you in regards to what might change given all of the 11th house transit. So very excited for you all at this time, and be mindful about those big groups, and I hope that everything goes well.